I don't know about you, but clowns have always seemed very scary to me. Perhaps because of the killer clown movies that are so popular in our culture. However, not everyone knows that many of these stories are based on real events. In this video, Top F will tell you the story of the most famous killer clown in history. And before we start, support my channel with your likes, subscriptions, and turn on notifications to catch all the new releases. Get your popcorn, we start. A successful businessman involved in charity work, an exemplary family man. The wife of U.S. President Jimmy Carter shook hands with him. This character is John Wayne Gacy. At first, the police could not even admit that it was he who was a cruel maniac who raped and killed at least 30 people. A special cynicism to his crimes was given by the fact that he committed them, dressed in a clown costume and applying appropriate makeup to his face. 30 years ago, this clown was one of the 10 worst serial killers. What is the history of his crimes? How did the investigation work? And why did the investigators not immediately get on the trail of John Gacy? A successful businessman and philanthropist meets the wife of the President of the United States. Rosalind Carter, the wife of U.S. President Jimmy Carter, arrived in Chicago on May 1978 to participate in the annual parade in honor of the Polish Constitution adopted in 1791. The program of the magnificent celebration included fireworks, a costume show, and a performance by musicians. The First Lady was supposed to attend the event as a guest of honor and then talk with the best representatives of the nation, including John Gacy. The latter was active in charitable activities, supported the Democratic Party, and organized large parades in Chicago. Rosalind happily took a picture with Gacy and a little later sent him a photo by mail after providing him with a handwritten wish for every success. How could she know that a businessman who donates to charity has another face and role that does not fit in with his usual image at all? 7 months later, police arrested Gacy. Investigators carefully examined his home in a suburb of Chicago. As soon as they entered there, they smelled the smell of decaying flesh. Having dismantled the brickwork of the walls, the detectives saw a horrific picture: the remains of 29 boys and young men. Gacy raped his victims, then killed, dismembered, and walled up in the walls of his own house or buried in the garden. The remains were everywhere: in the basement, in the garage, on the floor. Since there was not enough space to hide the traces of monstrous crimes in the house, Gacy threw the remains of 4 more victims into the Des Plaines River, which flowed nearby. Maniac under the guise of a model citizen. The public was shocked. The Gacy trial has become one of the most scandalous in the history of American justice. Out of fear of the revenge of the relatives of the victims, the perpetrator was under the tireless control of a police escort. During the trial, friends and family members of those killed by Gacy fainted, and one of the witnesses vomited right at the meeting. On March 13, 1980, Gacy was sentenced to death, but journalists and ordinary Americans still had a question: how could a seemingly exemplary citizen turn out to be a merciless serial killer? Why didn't anyone notice that behind Gacy's ostentatious good nature was a cruel maniac? This question worried society primarily because Gacy was a typical personification of the American dream. He was born into a poor family and from childhood was forced to work. He happened to be a courier, a gardener, and a shoe seller. Gacy later married the daughter of a Kentucky fast food chain owner and ran his restaurant. Gacy had only 2 weaknesses: food, because of which he suffered from obesity, and sports cars. He constantly ran into speeding tickets. First conviction and early release. However, Gacy did not manage to splurge for a long time, posing as an ambitious careerist and an exemplary family man. In early 1968, the police unexpectedly raided his house. Gacy was accused of raping several young men. In the suspect's room, detectives found a collection of pornographic films. Gacy's wife Merlin Myers was shocked, as she considered her husband an excellent family man and an attentive father of 2 children. Gacy was accused of assaulting a 16-year-old teenager, whom he threatened with a knife and then handcuffed. However, the young man managed to escape. Gacy repeatedly forced another minor to perform oral sex. At the trial, the accused did not confess to these crimes, but the evidence was enough to put the 26-year-old criminal in prison for 10 years in the fall of 1968. Gacy's wife immediately filed for divorce, which she received in November of that year. In custody, Gacy, prisoner 26526 to be exact, behaved impeccably. He began working as a cook in the prison cafeteria and did not come into conflict with other prisoners even when they tried to attack him. Thanks to exemplary behavior, the prisoner was released after 18 months. It is significant that despite this, psychologists who observed Gacy described him as an antisocial personality that cannot be completely cured by means known to science. Maniac trying on a clown mask. After his release from prison, Gacy left Iowa, where he lived until the verdict, and returned to his native Chicago. There he took up construction and quickly became famous as a successful businessman. In June 1971, Gacy married for the second time to his longtime acquaintance Carol Hoff and took up charity work. Especially willingly, he performed at charity events as a pogo clown. Moreover, he invented the costume and makeup himself, which won him great love from the local children. Gacy's second marriage didn't work out, so he started manhunting. But all this activity was only a disguise. At home, Gacy proved to be a real tyrant. During quarrels with his wife, he broke furniture and shouted. From time to time it came to assault. In addition, Gacy forbade his wife to enter some rooms of the house and began to buy porn magazines with naked men and young men. Because of this, in March 1976, the marriage broke up, and nothing prevented Gacy from starting a real hunt for people. The maniac had many ways to attract a potential victim. Most often, he seduced young people with a profitable part-time job in his construction company, while at the same time offering to live at home for the first time. There he drank alcohol with the guest, smoked marijuana, and tried to persuade him to have sex. If this approach did not work, Gacy dressed up as a clown and began to perform tricks. The signature number was handcuffs. Gacy, without outside help, removed the closed handcuffs from his wrists. After that, he jokingly suggested that the guest repeat the trick. Naturally, no one succeeded. Now the potential victim was helpless. Gacy, in the form of a clown, raped her and specially strangled her with a rope and a stick. He proudly demonstrated his know-how to investigators during interrogation. At first, no one suspected Gacy. Gacy committed his first murder in 1972. Since that moment, the time intervals between disappearances of people have been decreasing. Once a clown killed 2 young men in one evening. Gacy's methods changed. Now he began to drive around the city at night in a black van and lure potential victims with an offer of a ride, and sometimes with a fake police badge. As the number of missing people climbed into the dozens, Chicago began to panic. Surprisingly, the police did not suspect Gacy at first, even though almost all the disappeared teenagers worked for his firm. The killer was only asked a few times about what he thinks about the disappearance of his employees. Gacy escaped with generalities. Even the Secret Services had nothing against him because otherwise, the wife of the President of the United States would never shake hands with a man who is suspected of killing children, especially on sexual grounds. Gacy's first serious risk was only when one of his victims, Jeffrey Ringnall, who was stuffed with chloroform by the maniac, fled. Ringnall decided to figure out the tormentor himself, as he remembered what his car looked like. However, the police did not take decisive action in this case either, doubting that Ringnall was able to accurately point to the killer's car. The police and the FBI are on the trail of Gacy. The ice broke when, on December 12, 1978, 15-year-old Robert Priest disappeared in the small town of Des Plaines, a suburb of Chicago. The day before, he had told his mother that he was going to meet John Gacy. The police and the FBI, who joined in the search for the missing teenager, FBI documents on the Gacy case can be viewed here, decided to check this man. It turned out that Gacy had previously been convicted of child molestation. So he became the prime suspect. Gacy confesses to having committed about 30 murders. Although Gacy was placed under surveillance, he managed to carry Priest's corpse out of the house and throw it into the river. After that, he appeared as if nothing had happened for another interrogation. The protocol drawn up on its results notes that Gacy had a glassy look and mud-stained shoes. The prosecutor issued a search warrant for the prime suspect's home. The killer was frightened and admitted in a conversation with a friend that he had done a bunch of unpleasant things. Hours later, Gacy confessed to the police that he had committed about 30 murders and drew a detailed diagram of the burial of the bodies of his victims. The police ransacked Gacy's house inch by inch. The search report states that 24 bodies were identified. At the trial, they tried to make Gacy crazy, but he was still condemned to death. During the trial, which took place in February 1989, Gacy's lawyers tried to present their client as crazy. In addition, they told the court about the criminal's difficult childhood and that his father hated homosexuals, which traumatized the child's psyche. Despite these arguments, on March 13th, the court sentenced Gacy to death. The text of the decision can be viewed here. The convict filed an appeal 4 times, trying to delay the punishment, and even wrote a book where he said that God himself returned his heterosexual orientation to him. However, the tricks did not work. The verdict remained in force. In prison, Gacy painted pictures of clowns. Even while awaiting execution, Gacy did not give up. On the contrary, he proved to be a cunning businessman. For example, anyone could talk to him on the phone for $23. In addition, the killer began to draw. The usual subject of his paintings was clowns. Protesting against this, relatives of the victims bought the drawings and defiantly burned them. However, the maniac earned a lot. The price of some paintings reached $20,000. On May 10, 1994, the death sentence was carried out. Gacy was given a lethal injection. He died for a long time. Since the syringe needle turned out to be defective, the execution lasted 18 minutes. The last words of the maniac were "kiss my ass," which hardly indicates his repentance. Thanks for watching this video to the end. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Also, write down in the comments what topic of the video you want to see in the next release of Top F. Bye.